History was made at the 2020 Academy Awards with one fantastic moment.
And the Oscar goes to Parasite.
Parasite not only won Best Original Screenplay, Best International Feature Film, and Best Director, but it also took home Best Picture, making it the first international non-English language film to ever win the award in the history of the Oscars. Pretty amazing if I do say so myself. Though this was not the first time the opportunity for such a historic moment arose. In 2018, Mexican film Roma was released on Netflix. The movie was a semi-autobiographical story of director Alfonso Cuarón and followed the life of a domestic worker in the Colonia Roma sector of Mexico City. The movie was met with widespread critical acclaim. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. At the 91st Academy Awards, Roma was doing very well. It won Best Cinematography, Best International Feature Film, and Best Director, and it was looking like the popular vote for Best Picture as well, which was huge. The opportunity for a non-English language film to win Best Picture had never looked more in reach. This was it. It was going to happen.
And the Oscar goes to Green Book.
But then it didn't. People were upset at this, and rightfully so. Roma was widely seen as the best film of the year, definitely the best out of the Best Picture noms, and yet instead of giving the award to a beautiful, intimate look at domestic life in Mexico, the Academy gave it to a vapid, borderline white savior story in which Hollywood tries once again to convince us racism can be solved with a snap of a finger. This was doubly egregious because 2019 was also the year that both Black Panther and BlacKkKlansman were nominated for Best Picture, both of which were much better movies for the Black community in America. That, in and of itself, is a whole other problem, but I digress. The point I'm trying to make right now is that instead of giving Best Picture to a Mexican Spanish language film that really deserved it, the Academy gave it to a mediocre American film that really didn't. Fast forward a year later, and I was pretty sure the same thing was going to happen to Parasite. Most people agreed that Parasite was the film that deserved it, and yet I was worried that Roma had set a precedent for this sort of thing and that Parasite would not win. So I was beyond thrilled, as I'm sure most people were, when Jane Fonda said,
Parasite.
Roma's loss and Parasite's win got me thinking. What happened? What happened in that one year that let Roma lose and Parasite win? But most importantly, why are international and non-English language films so hard to get into the Oscars, and even harder to get to Best Picture? Welcome to a 3-part series in which I explore international, non-English language films at the Oscars. This video, part 1, will take a look at the category Best International Feature Film and the good and not-so-good lore surrounding it. Part 2 will focus on the uphill battle international films face in order to even have a chance to be considered for Best Picture, and Part 3 will explore the future of non-English language films at the Academy Awards. A lot of the information I'm using for this video came from this Vox article. It's very good, very comprehensive, and I definitely won't be able to fit every bit of information here, so I highly recommend reading the article after this video. It'll be linked down below. I'll also leave links to my other sources if you want to learn even more, and there will also be a list of all the films I mentioned in this video if you want to go check them out. Without further ado, let's delve into the home of non-English language films at the Oscars, the category Best International Feature Film. When the first Academy Awards were held in 1929, honoring films released in 1927 and 28, no non-English language film was honored. This was mostly because films released in 27 and 28 were largely silent. It wasn't until a post-war America that foreign films finally came into the mix. Academy leader Jean-Herr Schultz said, "An international award, if properly and carefully administered, would promote a closer relationship between American film craftsmen and those of other countries." From 1947 to 1955, 8 films were given special or honorary awards, the first being Italy's Shoeshine. This was followed by The Bicycle Thief, also Italian, France's Monsieur Vincent and Forbidden Games, Japan's Rashomon, Gates of Hell, and Samurai the Legend of Musashi, and Franco-Italian co-produced film The Walls of Malapaga. However, these awards were not handed out on a regular basis. There was no film honored at the 26th Academy Awards in 1953, and this award wasn't competitive, as there were no nominees, only a single winner. It was in 1956 that a separate competitive category was finally created for non-English language films, titled Best Foreign Language Film. The first winner was Italy's La Strada, which actually helped boost director Federico Fellini into the star status he has today. A new film has been awarded in this category ever since. On April 23, 2019, at the Academy's Board of Governors meeting, it was decided that the category would be renamed to Best International Feature Film, starting at the 92nd Academy Awards in 2020. The change was made because the term foreign was outdated within the global filmmaking community. The new name better represents this category and promotes a positive and inclusive view of filmmaking and the art of a universal experience. The very first winner of this newly named category was, in fact, Parasite. However, while the name of the category has changed to be less outdated and more inclusive, the rules for qualification haven't changed at all, and if you've looked into these rules even a little bit, you can immediately start to see why this is a problem. If you've been on the planet for any amount of time, you know there's a lot of countries in the world. According to my huge all-knowing brain and also Google, there are 195 countries across the world. 177 of them have active film industries, according to thenumbers.com. I'm not sure how old this website is, but for the sake of me making a long-winded point, we're using it. Of course, the United States produces the highest number of films every year, clocking in at 19,568, which makes them a total of $581 billion at the box office annually. At the opposite end of the spectrum is Côte d'Ivoire, which makes just one film every year and makes $0 at the box office. Now, I'm not sure if it says zero because they genuinely don't make that much money, or there's just not that much information available, but you get the point. Between the United States and Côte d'Ivoire, there are 175 countries, all of whom make a range of movies in a year. The total number of films produced by countries aside from the US is around 46,521, which is 46,521 films that could be eligible for Best International Feature Film. The total number of films that the Academy can nominate is 5. Yeah, that's a problem. Okay, hold on. Obviously saying that 46,521 films are eligible for an Oscar in this category is a grand statement to make. For one thing, not every single film released within a year is going to be good. In fact, I'm willing to bet there are many more mediocre to bad films released in a year than there are good ones. So let's take that into account. Let's do some estimation and chop that number, 46,000, in half. That leaves us with around 23,261 okay to good films. Well, then we can say that not every good film is so good that it deserves an Oscar, and that's true. There are plenty of films out there that I absolutely love, but that I wouldn't give an Oscar to. So let's take our number of good films and take 30% of it. That leaves us with 6,978 films that could deserve an Oscar. Well, then there are going to be certain films that, under the Academy's current requirements for this category, would not make the cut, and I'll talk about those requirements later on. So let's take our number of Oscar-worthy films and take 20% of it. That leaves us with around 1,396 films. 1,396 films that could plausibly be nominated in this category, and the Academy can only choose 5. And I know you'll probably say, but Oishi, you can do this for American films as well. And I agree, technically you can. Lots of American films are made every year, and there are only so many spots to fill for all the different categories. But the US's nearly 20,000 films is still nothing compared to the rest of the world's over 46,000. Starting with a lower total pool and going through all the steps that I did means there's still going to be less films vying for spots in categories. On top of that, American films have more choices of categories they can be nominated in. International films can also be nominated in more than one category, but it's less common. No matter what way you look at it, there's going to be tons of fantastic films from all over the world that will go unrecognized. And that's a lot tougher for non-English language films to deal with than it is for English-American ones, seeing as those will most probably already be on people's radars. American films are already playing in American theaters, being watched and loved by Americans, so if they don't get nominated in the categories people want, yeah, they may be pissed for a while, but they'll still know they exist. Every year after the nominees are announced, there are choruses of people saying, this film should have been nominated, this film was completely snubbed, and guess what people do when they hear that? They go and watch that film. But people can't go and watch a film to see how good it is if they don't know the film exists, and that's the position that a lot of international and non-English language films are put in. The power of an Oscar nomination, and any major award nomination to be honest, is unrivaled. It makes the chances of that film getting US distribution much higher. It makes the chances of people going to see it, then talking about it and making other people go see it, much higher. By limiting the number of slots in this category, the Academy is excluding a whole host of films that deserve recognition, solely because there wasn't enough space. Really, it is ridiculous to try and sum up an entire world's worth of films in just 5 slots. The Cannes Film Festival is among one of the most prestigious international film festivals, showcasing dozens of fantastic films and being attended by thousands of people from across the world annually. However, it was in 2018 that two people were notably absent from the festival: Russian director Kirill Serebrennikov and Iranian director Jafar Panahi. This was odd, seeing as they both had films debuting there. So, where were they? What could possibly keep them from attending the premiere of their own films? Serebrennikov was under house arrest. Panahi was in prison. The reason? Criticizing their countries through their art. But before we get too deep into that, let's backtrack just a little bit. As I mentioned before, the Best International Feature Film category at the Oscars has some rules. To qualify for the category, a film must have played in a commercial theater for at least a week in its home country. The dialogue must be predominantly in a language other than English, and the creative control of the film must have been largely in the hands of residents of the home country. Each country may select just one film every year to be put forth to the Academy for nomination, the process of selection being overseen by a special committee put together by the home country. After that, a Phase 1 committee of Academy members watch and vote on films by secret ballot, narrowing the pool to a short list of 10 films, 7 top movies, and 3 additional ones selected by the Academy's International Feature Film Award Executive Committee. After that, a Phase 2 committee watches and votes on the 10-film shortlist to narrow it to 5 official nominees. And lastly, only Academy members who have seen all 5 nominated films vote on one winner. Simple enough, right? But the first problem with this process is the very first step, the selection of which films will be put forth for consideration by each country. The Academy states that each country's selection must be made by, quote, one approved organization, jury, or committee that should include artists and/or craftsmen from the field of motion pictures, end quote. This selection jury is submitted to the Academy months in advance, but that's where the Academy's control ends. This wouldn't be much of a problem if the world was always a fine and dandy place to live in, but alas it's not. So while some countries are very public about who is on their selection committee and which films are being considered, in other countries, this is top secret information, and if this is the case, it's usually for one key reason. There are countries where movies are explicitly politicized, where there's a politics of censorship in place, where filmmakers are literally imprisoned or under house arrest, or literally banned from filmmaking because of their political positions. From our privileged places, having our country have complete control over the film scene isn't such a big deal, but for filmmakers from other countries, this can be disastrous. Serebrennikov's critical views on Putin, LGBTQ laws, and Russia's annexation of Crimea earned him a criminal charge of embezzlement with plans to harm the state. Panahi's films got him, his family, and his friends arrested and charged with creating propaganda against the Iranian government in 2010. He was sentenced to 6 years in jail and forbidden from filmmaking, giving interviews, writing screenplays, and leaving the country for 20 years, which means he couldn't even go to Cannes if he wanted to. Thankfully, Panahi is a badass, so he continued making films in secret, having them smuggled out of the country so they could be shown at various festivals like Cannes and Berlin. But even with them finding ways to make and show their films, they are far from being considered for awards. In some cases, filmmakers may be able to win nominations by doing some serious work. In 2015, Russian producer Alexander Rodnyansky set out on a mission to find out each and every member of the Russian Selection Committee, information on which was kept private. Eventually, he found them all, a total of 29 people, and personally ensured they watched his Putin-critical film Leviathan. The work paid off, as the committee put forth Leviathan to the Academy as their official selection, and it went on to become one of the 5 official nominees for that year. While this was definitely a win, the sheer amount of effort that went into making it happen is unbelievable, and realistically, how many people would have the time, energy, and resources to do that? Not many. Serebrennikov and Panahi certainly couldn't, and even if they could, the state of selection in Russia is not the same as it is in other restrictive countries. In China, you're not going to make it past the bar unless you please a body of people who are unnamed and unknown, but who we can assume would like filmmakers to toe a line. This is clearly true, as Chinese filmmakers Ai Weiwei and Deng Chuanbin were placed under house arrest because their films were seen as threats to the state. In fact, China retains absolute control over their filmmakers. Their independent film festival was shut down because it was too difficult to operate under the political climate that condemns topics like political history and homosexuality, themes that are heavily touched on by festival films. On top of that, these films often lack the government's seal of censorship approval, without which they cannot be publicly screened to Chinese audiences. The whole way that global film festivals are organized, which reverberates in this process of nomination of Academy Awards, is they emerge out of a post-World War I nationalism, in which nations take film as a form of soft power. In fact, China's official Oscars entries in recent years have been getting more and more nationalistic. All these cases have one commonality: the forceful silencing of filmmakers who rub the governments of their home countries the wrong way. Though they and their work are celebrated by the rest of the world at film festivals, their own home countries try their best to squash their art. Though Panahi's film The White Balloon was Iran's official entry in 1995, not nominated, the chances of the Iranian selection entering another one of his films now is laughable. It won't happen, and the same goes for Serebrennikov, Weiwei, Chuanbin, and countless others. Unless they make a film submissive enough for their governments, these filmmakers will never be nominated for a statue. Films that get nominated by such countries are ones that inevitably will do the bidding of the government. They will completely exclude politically dissident filmmakers, who are often really excellent filmmakers, from ever being considered for an Oscar. And this is really, really sad. As I mentioned before, there's so much great art out there that we in the West don't have ready, easy access to, and one way for us to get that access is through an Oscar nomination. But on top of that, there are tons of filmmakers whose art is beautiful, special, and important. These filmmakers and their films deserved to be recognized, to be awarded for their great art, and that can't happen if their home countries control that aspect of the industry and will do anything to silence them. There are great films, not merely dissident films, but also aesthetically really accomplished films that will never be nominated. The Oscars are barring themselves from considering some of the best filmmakers in the world, simply because they are putting their decisions in the hands of causes like governmental organizations. So while some countries are genuinely trying to find the best film of the year to submit to the Academy regardless of subject matter, we cannot ignore the large number of countries who weed out great films and restrict their creators. The Academy is supposed to recognize excellence in film, but they can't do that if they're not even seeing some of the best the world has to offer. So even though the Academy leaves the decision of which films are submitted to each individual country, this is where they finally step in, and sometimes the result is undesirable. Some films don't get put on the shortlist, not because they simply didn't get enough votes, but because the Academy deems them not international enough. This tends to happen when the Academy decides a certain film is not predominantly told in a language other than English, which is essentially breaking the first requirement for this category. The rule is needed presumably so places like the UK, Canada, and Australia don't dominate this category with their own English language films. They can and have submitted films that aren't in English in the past, which is completely fine. It's just that the rule bars them from submitting films in English. And this kind of makes sense. When you have a category dedicated to celebrating international films, you don't want it clogged up with films from countries that have cultures and film industries so similar to that of the United States, especially when films from these places already find it easier to be nominated in other categories. However, we start to run into a problem when we leave the UK, Canada, and Australia behind. English is not only the official language in these places, but in a lot of places around the world because of that fun little thing called colonization. Many countries that are not our squad have English as their official language, or at least a lingua franca, which means most films produced in those countries will be in the English language. Most recently, this was the case with Lionheart, Nigeria's first ever submission for the Academy Awards. The Academy disqualified Lionheart because it was in Nigeria's official language, English. Director Ava DuVernay spoke up about this on Twitter, saying, "To the Academy, you disqualified Nigeria's first ever submission for Best International Feature because it's in English, but English is the official language of Nigeria. Are you barring this country from ever competing for an Oscar in its official language?" Now, Lionheart and others like it are eligible to compete in other categories, and have in the past, but it's not always a viable option for films from countries that tend to have smaller budgets to get nominated in other categories, especially since Oscar campaigns cost thousands of dollars. This means films from small countries that have English as an official language or a lingua franca, places like Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, etc., have this rule as yet another hurdle to consider. Films made in English, aka films that the majority of the population could watch and understand, would have little to no chance of being nominated for Best International Feature, while films made in languages other than English, aka films that would be a lot less accessible for the residents of the country producing it and would therefore not be seen by as many people, would have a larger chance of an Oscar nomination. In this way, it's like the Academy would value a film from a country that the very people of that country don't value as much, and the films in English that have been seen and valued more would not get the Oscar recognition they deserve, which means they wouldn't get US distribution, which means other people couldn't see them either. This whole rule restricting English language entries has a lot more wrong with it than meets the eye. On the outside, it's simply a way to keep the squad from dominating a category they really shouldn't. But when we really hold the rule up to a microscope, it shows us what the Academy's understanding of international or foreign really is. Not English. The term foreign has the feeling of being other, so the Academy ditched it for the more positive, inclusive term international, acknowledging the fact that in our global filmmaking landscape, movies from around the world that offer new perspectives deserve to be recognized no matter their language. But at the same time, they exclude or disqualify English language films as if being told in English makes those films part of our American culture, and films that aren't told in English are not part of the American culture. This is kind of an archaic understanding of what makes something international. For example, while I speak much better English than my native language of Bengali, that doesn't mean that I am 100% part of American or North American culture. I still heavily take part in Bengali culture. I wear the clothes, I eat the food, I celebrate the events. If my life was a story, I would tell it in English. That doesn't make it any less international. That doesn't make it American. On top of that, defining international films as solely non-English only perpetuates Americans' aversion to subtitled films. Once again, this is a very self-centered quip to have about international films. I grew up watching foreign language films and learning so much from them and being inspired. Films like Citizen Kane, Jaws, Rashomon, The Godfather, and Breathless. See, that's something that I genuinely think some Americans don't understand, that other countries exist, and people exist in those countries, and they are consuming American content that is, to them, international, content that is subtitled, and they have no problem with it. It's really only select Americans who do. But again, this goes to show how using language to define the term international is not practical. The term has a different meaning wherever you go. I mean, you could argue that I, a Canadian, have also been growing up on international content. A lot of my favorite movies are American, told in the English language. In fact, I think there's only one Canadian film on my list of favorites, and it's a French film. My favorite international films are in English, and my favorite domestic ones are in French. Are you starting to see how stupid it is to use language to signify internationality? And other people agree. The Academy seems to have inherited a sort of 19th century colonial mindset, in that there is a center in which they imagine themselves, Hollywood, and then there is a periphery, where they imagine other industries and other kinds of filmmaking that goes on. They have inherited these 19th century categories of how you identify these differences. The one they have chosen is language, cultural difference signified through linguistic difference. But now, they're in a 21st century period of globalization, where if you inspect any of these things too much, they fall apart. The idea of language as a marker of difference certainly doesn't work after you realize that English has spread around the world. Aside from language, the Academy may also disqualify a film from the running if they deem that, quote, sufficient creative control hasn't been vested in local talent. Again, on the outside, this makes sense. A country shouldn't be able to hire any random filmmakers to make a film for them and then submit it to the Oscars. The film should be theirs through and through. But once again, when put into practice, this rule has made for some strange results. For example, the Academy disqualified Taiwan's 2008 submission, Ang Lee's film Lost Caution, because a few key crew members were not Taiwanese, regardless of the fact that most of them were. In 2011, Albania's official entry, The Forgiveness of Blood, was about Albania, was told in the Albanian language, and had a majority Albanian crew. And yet, the Academy disqualified it because several key crew members were not Albanian. However, in the same year, Finland submitted Aki Kaurismäki's film Le Havre, which was shot in France, told in the French language, and had a French cast. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. I think there's a problem with the system when Hollywood claims to know better than the submitting country whether a film belongs to them. It is incredibly disempowering and disenchanting for a country with a young film industry. I think that hits the nail right on the head. Countries know what movies tell their stories. They know which stories they value, whether they be told in English or otherwise, whether they be made completely by local talent or otherwise. The Academy stepping in to say, well, actually, this film isn't your story and therefore will not get our award, is frustrating at best and insulting at worst. Clearly, the category Best International Feature Film has some issues. A lot of it is long-standing and has been limiting this category from being the absolute best it could be, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it. So, how exactly do we go about doing that? Well, for one thing, the Academy could leave several slots for one country to submit films. There are often times that one country will produce a number of beautiful films in the same year, and will then be forced to make the difficult decision of which one to put forth to the Academy and which one to leave behind in the dust. This was the case just last year with France. Their official submission was Les Misérables, but Portrait of a Lady on Fire was also critically acclaimed and deserved to be recognized. So letting more films be submitted and letting more films end up on the shortlist is a step in the right direction in getting this number down. We could also forget about making individual countries submit a film altogether, and instead have a committee within the Academy select them, sort of in the way that Best Documentary Feature is chosen. The documentary committee pays attention to the world of documentaries, and makes the choice themselves, so there really isn't any reason why the same couldn't be done for international. Clearly, judging by the length of this video, and the fact that there will be 2 more after this, there are people out there who care immensely about international films, who would treat the category with the same care that those on the Documentary Feature Committee treat documentaries. This way, politically dissonant filmmakers could actually have a shot of winning one of these things. As for the English language rule, admittedly, this one is a bit harder. If you get rid of the rule altogether, there will be nothing stopping the squad from entering their English language films into the category, and the Academy will have no fair grounds to disqualify them. Maybe they would refrain from clogging up this category out of respect for what it's really for, but we never know. Getting rid of this rule altogether is a risky move, but keeping it is an unfair one. Countries like Nigeria should be allowed to enter their films. So then, maybe get rid of the rule except for the squad? I don't know what would be the best way to do this, and you know what? I don't have to, because I'm not part of the Academy. It's not my job to figure this out. It's the Academy's. And I really do hope they figure it out. Not just for this one thing, but also for all of it. It's already difficult enough for international films to be seen on a level akin to that of the Oscars. We don't need to make it more difficult. And yet, it is. It is more difficult, because we've only just scratched the surface of the adversity that international films face at the Oscars. At least Best International Feature Film is a category curated specifically for them. But how difficult is it to be nominated for other categories? How difficult is it for international films to be nominated for the big boy, Best Picture? I guess you'll just have to stay tuned to find out. Best Picture, the category at the Academy Awards that is the cause of much civilized discourse and annoying yelling. Since the inception of the Oscars, Western films told in the English language have been the recipients of Best Picture. Yes, there was Francis the Artist, but that was silent, so no language to be heard. Also, it's a movie about Hollywood, and we all know Hollywood loves to jerk itself off, so of course the Oscar goes too. But there's one film that, for me, is truly an outlier.
Parasite.
Actually, no, that's not what I'm talking about here. I know, shocking. But go back 10 years.
And the Oscar goes to Slumdog Millionaire, Christian Colson producer.
Slumdog Millionaire is a 2008 British drama loosely adapted from Vikas Swaroop's 2005 novel Q&A. The story follows Mumbai local Jamal Malik, a contestant on India's version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire called Kaun Banega Crorepati. When he's suspected of cheating, we follow him through his past to discover how he had all the answers. The movie was told in both Hindi and English. Slumdog Millionaire received widespread critical acclaim and was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Sound familiar? The movie was met with widespread critical acclaim. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Yeah, I thought so too. But, spoiler alert, Slumdog Millionaire got a much happier ending than Roma did. The success stories of Slumdog Millionaire and Roma are too similar to be ignored. I mean, they even had the same number of Academy Award nominations, 6 of which were for the exact same categories. The only difference is Slumdog is a Western film, and has a lot more green boxes, including Best Picture. So this got me thinking, if Slumdog Millionaire was produced in the East instead of the West, if it was a Bollywood film instead of a Hollywood one, would it have won Best Picture? No, I wholeheartedly believe that it absolutely would not have won Best Picture. And it's not just cause, oh, Academy racist. No, of course not. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. Welcome to part 2 of a 3-part series in which I explore international, non-English language films at the Academy Awards. Part 1 was about the category Best International Feature Film. This part 2, is about the struggle international films face to get to Best Picture, and part 3 will focus on the future of international films at the Oscars. You don't need to have watched part 1 before this, but if you'd like to, it'll be linked down below. Once again, I'll also leave all of my sources in the description if you'd like to learn more. Last video, we talked about the good and bad sides of the category Best International Feature Film. At the end, I mentioned that it's difficult enough for international films to get nominated in a category specifically curated for them, but it's 100 times more difficult for international films to get nominated for Best Picture. But why exactly is that? At the very first Academy Awards in 1929, two categories were considered to be the most prestigious of the night: Outstanding Picture, won by revolutionary war film Wings, and Unique and Artistic Picture, won by art film Sunrise. Each award honored different but equally important aspects of filmmaking. In 1930, the category Unique and Artistic Picture was left behind, leaving just Outstanding Picture as the highest honor, and this is how it's been ever since. The name underwent a number of changes over the years. After Outstanding Picture, the name became Academy Award for Outstanding Production from 1930 to 1940, Academy Award for Outstanding Motion Picture from 1941 to 1943, Academy Award for Best Motion Picture from 1944 to 1961, and finally, Academy Award for Best Picture from 1962 to the present, still going strong. Best Picture was awarded to a representative of the production company until 1950, after which the award was given to all credited producers. In the early years of the Academy Awards, anywhere from 8 to 12 films could be nominated for Best Picture. This was later changed to a cap of 5 films, which was again changed in 2009 to a range of 5 to 10 films. At the same time of this change, voting for the nominees changed from first past the post to instant runoff or preferential voting. Nominees must receive either 5% of first place rankings or 5% after the single transferable vote nominating process. I could try and explain what that is, but I'd like to keep this video under half an hour, so pause and read if you'd like. Basically, 5% is the golden number. Best Picture is the only Academy Award category for which every Academy member is eligible to vote. Like Best International Feature Film, Best Picture has its own set of rules. Some of these rules in particular make it harder for international films to make their way into the category. The rules to be eligible for Best Picture include that the film must have a running length of more than 40 minutes, must have been exhibited theatrically on a 35 or 70mm film or in a qualifying digital format, must open in a commercial theater for paid admission in Los Angeles County between January 1st and midnight December 31st, and run for 7 consecutive days, at least 3 screenings daily, one of which needs to be between 6 and 10 p.m., and be sufficiently advertised in Los Angeles media. The first 2 requirements aren't anything super difficult, but the third requirement is where things start to get rocky. Must open in a commercial theater in Los Angeles County. And this, people, is the kicker. While in the last video I was going on about getting US distribution so more people would be able to see fantastic films, this is probably the more practical reason why studios want their films to get US distribution, because without it, they are closed off to the Academy Awards. For Western films, getting US distribution is not very hard, but for international films, it's a bit harder, which makes the road to the Oscars a bit harder. Let's use Slumdog Millionaire as our example. Let's pretend it is an Indian film, produced by an Indian studio, made by Indian filmmakers with an all-Indian cast and crew, and told mostly, if not entirely, in Hindi. So, we've done the hard part. We've made a whole-ass film and it's ready for release. Now what? Well, the other hard part. For an Indian film like Slumdog, it won't be hard to get it distributed in India, but to get it distributed in other countries, namely the US, there's a couple other hurdles to take into consideration. Obviously, we're going to need to find a distributor. Because distributing a film costs lots of time and money, distributors are going to want to be sure that whatever film they pick up is going to make them a sufficient return on their investment. Huge blockbusters won't have much trouble in this regard. Something like Avengers Endgame is guaranteed to bring in the money, so that's a no-brainer. A film by a beloved director or starring big names are also safer bets to go with, so if you're Christopher Nolan and your film stars Leonardo DiCaprio, you're golden. But our film, Slumdog Millionaire, is directed by an Indian director. He's relatively well known in India, but a stranger to the West. On top of that, Slumdog stars, for lack of a better term, nobodies. Our lead actors are a mix of already established Indian actors and entirely new faces, so there's no drawing factor for Western distributors. Of course, we can still shoot our shot. We can arrange meetings between our studio and distributors in Hollywood, hoping we can garner some interest. But to help us with that, we need to try to hit the big 3: Venice, Cannes, and Berlin. Throw in Sundance and TIFF, and that is a strong festival circuit right there. Film festivals are a fantastic opportunity for lesser-known films to be shown to a wider audience, so it's a good move to make. Of course, whether or not Slumdog is accepted into every festival is another story, but let's just say that this is a perfect world and we can manage to get into every single one of them. Besides, international festivals like the aforementioned have been known to show a wide variety of films, so it's not a stretch to think we could get in. Great, we can now put these little fancy seals on all our promotional and marketing material. But getting into the festival is only the first hurdle. People also have to go see the movie. We might get reporters and reviewers, but the general public is going to be harder to convince to go see an Indian film told in Hindi with those pesky English subtitles across the bottom of the screen, especially in 2008. It's going to be doubly difficult when other more well-known English language films are being screened around or at the same time. If Slumdog manages to have a successful festival circuit, which there's no guarantee that it will, it may get more good reviews from journalists, more people may talk about the film, and more people may be interested in seeing it. Most importantly, it may attract the attention of Western distributors. If this is the case, hallelujah, we did it! Now anyone in the US will be able to watch the film and it can gain even more popularity. Or so you would think. Even if an international movie like our version of Slumdog is successful in getting US distribution, its distribution is not going to be anywhere near as wide as that of American films. Again, big blockbusters and films with already established names attached to them will take up many more screens than a relatively unknown international film, successful film festival circuit or no. On top of that, theaters don't really know how to market international films. They don't know how to make the idea of going to see a subtitled film appealing to American audiences, and they sure as hell didn't back in 2008. On top of that, a lot of the film screenings may be found in small indie theaters, to which the majority of the population don't visit. Because of these factors, most international films don't even receive wide US distribution at all. At this point, award season would be rolling around, which means it's time to decide whether or not to campaign for an Oscar. Once again, a number of factors go into making this decision. If people are excited about the film, if they're talking about it, telling other people to go watch it, pushing its name and reputation higher and higher, this is obviously making things look promising. But with Slumdog, we've got a problem. Maybe there's people talking about the film, but it's definitely nowhere near the level that other films are being talked about. Because the film is still rather obscure, what with its extremely limited theatrical release, the chances of any of our cast or crew members being interviewed or invited onto talk shows is insanely low, which means the name of our director and stars are not in people's mouths, and neither is the film's. At this point, the studio has to honestly ask itself, is it worth campaigning for an Oscar? With a situation like this, no, it's not. Oscar campaigns cost upwards of tens of millions of dollars. It's all for your consideration billboards and ads, and dozens of screeners and care packages sent to the homes of Academy members. All of it costs a pretty penny, so if you're gonna campaign, you've gotta be pretty damn confident with your chances of getting nominated. And what helps with those chances? Well, winning awards at film festivals and other prestigious events, having people be excited about the film, doing press interviews, talk shows, basically everything I just went over, aka everything we as an obscure international film don't have. A studio is not going to spend tens of hundreds of millions of dollars campaigning for an Oscar they know they won't get. That's why Universal completely pulled its awards funding for Cats in 2019, because they knew they wouldn't win anything. Honestly, I find it hilarious they even had awards funding for it in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that without that pre-existing clout, dreams of an Oscar nom are out. So may as well save millions of dollars and not campaign. But just because we're not campaigning for the Academy Awards doesn't mean we can't still get nominated. After all, Slumdog has met all of the Best Picture requirements, and requirements from other categories as well, so it could technically still be nominated. But here's the thing. Campaigning is such an integral part of the entire process that choosing to not campaign for an Oscar is essentially digging your own grave. Academy members don't just vote for a thing they like if they think it doesn't have a chance. It's like that with most voting. Not doing a campaign made it a self-fulfilling prophecy that we wouldn't get nominated. That really tells you a lot about the climate surrounding these Oscar campaigns. Basically, if you want to win an Oscar, you've got to throw unholy amounts of money into campaigning your film, and if you don't, well, your film will be the last on the minds of Academy voters. It won't be taken seriously as a contender. Even if an Academy member did really enjoy Slumdog and thought it deserved a Best Picture nom, they're not going to waste their vote on a film that not many people are talking about, that isn't even being campaigned. So essentially, Slumdog as an international film would have to fight to get US distribution, and if it was successful, it wouldn't get a wide release and its marketing would be abysmal, which means not a lot of people would have seen it, which means not a lot of people would be talking about it, which means it wouldn't be gaining the same amount of popularity as other films, which means come award season, our cast and crew wouldn't be interviewed or invited onto talk shows, which means their names and the film's name would remain relatively unknown, which means our Indian studio wouldn't want to throw millions and millions of dollars into an Oscar campaign, which means Academy voters wouldn't see it as a real contender, which means it would have no Oscars to its name other than possibly Best International Feature Film, a category of which I already spent a whole video explaining its flaws. So, if Slumdog Millionaire was an Indian film rather than a British one, its chances of being nominated for Best Picture would be the slimmest, and its chances of winning, non-existent. But it's not an Indian film, it's a British one, so it didn't have nearly as much trouble getting to the US, and once it did, it was met with the popularity it wouldn't have gotten if it was international. But while Western audiences loved the film, it received less of a warm reception from India. While some audiences and film critics responded positively, others had issues, from Jamal's use of British English to the unsavory portrayal of the Mumbai slums to the fact that similar films by Indian filmmakers have not received equal recognition. Let me say that louder for the people in the back. Similar films by Indian filmmakers have not received equal recognition. That's another thing about all of this. The Academy is much quicker to reward Western films made by Western, usually white filmmakers who have made films about people of color rather than international films made by international filmmakers about their own people. Again, the reasoning for this is not just, ooh, Academy racist, but it's because of everything I just spent the last 10 minutes talking about. And this is not just a one-off thing. This happens a lot, where white filmmakers will tell international stories or stories about people of color and receive accolade after accolade for it, while international filmmakers telling stories that they are more well-versed in, stories that are more personal to them, will not. On one hand, I know the majority of these filmmakers are well-intentioned. They just want to tell stories they find interesting. But sometimes they will take liberties that either aren't accurate or that will unintentionally and subtly perpetuate stereotypes. However, even with all of that, there are still South Asian people who love Slumdog. It's why my dad gets so excited at the mention of it. It's why I even got a little excited every time I looked it up while researching for this video and saw Academy Award for Best Picture listed as an accolade. Because while it's not an Indian film, and while it does have its issues, there's still a sense of pride there. There's still an excitement to see a film that features India so heavily get recognized on this level. I don't know why exactly that is. Maybe it's like the lack of representation in the media, especially in 2008. I don't know. In the end, Slumdog Millionaire is a Western film, and managed to get to Best Picture much easier because of it. But 10 years have passed since then, and now both Roma and Parasite, actual international films, have gotten nominated for Best Picture, and Parasite even won. So, what happened? What went right with these two films? Both Roma and Parasite had quite interesting but different journeys to Best Picture. Those journeys started with arriving in the West, with US distribution. I would say that Roma got a fantastic deal when its distribution rights were purchased by Netflix. Netflix has some misses, but it also has a fair number of hits. In recent years, Netflix has either produced or distributed some truly phenomenal projects. 2018's Roma was among the first of these to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Picture, and in the very next year, both Marriage Story and The Irishman were also nominated. Being distributed on Netflix was a huge advantage for Roma, seeing as hordes and hordes more people were able to watch it than if it had been released in theaters. It was able to garner great popularity on Netflix all over the world. It also helped that the film was directed by Academy darling Alfonso Cuarón, who had been working in the States for a decade at that point and had already won a number of Oscars for his 2013 English-language film Gravity. On top of that, Roma's excellence sparked talk all over the internet, as well as attracted nominations for other awards like the BAFTAs and Golden Globes. The combination of Cuarón already being well-known and respected in Hollywood, Roma being easily accessible on Netflix, and the huge number of awards it was garnering gave the movie the clout it needed for the studio to go through with an Oscar campaign, and lo and behold, 10 nominations, including Best Picture. Cuarón's golden reputation, along with Roma simply being a fantastic film, was able to help it in its treacherous journey to Best Picture. Parasite's story is slightly different, but no less impressive. Parasite's US distribution rights were purchased pretty early on by Neon, but like I mentioned before, the extent of its distribution paled in comparison to American films. For example, when Sonic the Hedgehog was released, it opened in 4,167 theaters across the US. Parasite opened in 3. Not 3 in each city, not 3 in each state, 3 in the entire country. And let me remind you that the US is this big. So, it opened in 3 theaters across the whole country, but its extremely successful festival circuit definitely came in clutch. Parasite had premiered at Cannes, where it was met with huge critical acclaim, and even went on to win the prestigious Palme d'Or. It was also shown and loved at TIFF. From these festival wins, it gained huge amounts of popularity, getting article after article written about it, getting everyone talking about it, even getting huge Hollywood stars expressing their love for it. From there, it too received nominations for a myriad of other awards, from BAFTAs to SAGs to Golden Globes. Slowly but surely, Parasite began expanding into more theaters over a period of several months, finally reaching 2,000 theaters as of President's Day weekend. This in and of itself was a huge achievement, seeing as only 12 non-English language films had ever been released in over 1,000 US theaters, the last one being Fearless, 13 years before Parasite. Though this was a huge achievement, Parasite still only managed to get into half as many theaters in its 4th month of release as Sonic got into on its first day. Sad, but true. But Parasite was doing fairly well at the box office. People were showing up for this film, and for good reason. It's amazing. Just talking about it is making me want to rewatch it. Because of its incredible popularity and critical acclaim, a for your consideration campaign was run, and Neon absolutely pulled through. Though the company had only been started 2 years earlier, Neon already had experience marketing an Oscars hopeful, and with their help, Parasite found itself with 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. And we all know how that ended.
Parasite.
Parasite dominated that night, but it was the Best Picture win that skyrocketed this film into even brighter of a limelight. On President's Day weekend, the first weekend after it won Best Picture, Parasite made $6.8 million, making that weekend its highest grossing since its debut in October. In the end, Parasite grossed $53.4 million in the US and Canada, and $211.2 million in other countries, making for a worldwide total of $264.4 million. So, both Roma and Parasite were wildly successful for international films. But what's interesting to me is that while Roma seemed to have more advantages, Parasite was the film that ended up taking home the award of the night. And it's not like one film was better than the other. I'd say the quality of each film was equal to the other. While Roma was released on Netflix, making it readily accessible for a wide audience, Parasite had to fight for each theater. While Alfonso Cuarón was already known and recognized by the Academy, Bong Joon-ho was less known in Hollywood and completely new to the Oscars. Which brings me to the last aspect that goes into making it to Best Picture. A big ol' heapin' pile of the luckiest luck that ever lucked. When it comes down to it, enough Academy members have to vote for the film in order for it to win. It just so happened that X number of Academy voters loved Parasite enough to rank it as their #1 choice, and unfortunately, it just so happened that the number of Academy voters who chose Roma as their #1 wasn't enough. And no one can control that. Everything else I talked about in this video, getting US distribution, having successful festival circuits, getting the word out about the film, running for your consideration campaigns, all of it is stuff that you have some level of control over. But at the end of the day, after you've worked your ass off to get your film into the US, after you've put millions of dollars into marketing to drive those box office sales up, after you've put even more millions and millions of dollars into campaigning the film around, after all is said and done, all that's left is filling out that ballot. And you've just gotta hope voters liked your film enough to choose it. So, there you have it. The insanely difficult road to getting an international film to Best Picture. Clearly, international films have it 10 times harder than Western ones when it comes to this highly sought-after category. The same film made by both the West and international countries would have vastly different experiences on their way to Best Picture, and the international film would have a much higher chance of being left behind. But the 2019 and 2020 Academy Awards have proved that it is possible for international films to be nominated in this category as well as win. Roma and Parasite have both opened a door. Now the question arises, what will happen in the future? Will the door remain open, or will it be shut in our faces? It's been almost a year since Parasite made history at the 2020 Academy Awards, and clearly I'm still not over it. This was such a fantastic thing for the Oscars, for South Korea, and for international films as a whole. On top of that, it was only a year earlier that Roma, another international film, was also nominated for Best Picture. Unfortunately, it didn't win, but the fact that it was nominated at all was so very heartening. These films being nominated for and winning in this category shows that there is indeed space for international films at award shows, at the Oscars, in America. But while Roma and Parasite were showered in love after their time at the Oscars, love was not all that they received, and the love they did get could definitely have been multiplied, and, I believe, would have been multiplied if they were Western films instead of international ones. Nevertheless, they did what seemed to be impossible, and now I'd like to know, who's gonna do it next? And if and when they do, what will they be met with? Welcome to the last part of a 3-part series in which I explore international films at the Academy Awards. Part 1 was about the category Best International Feature Film and the issues surrounding it, Part 2 was about the struggle international films face on their way to Best Picture, and this part, Part 3, is about the future of international films at the Academy Awards. You don't have to have watched the first 2 parts before this one, but I do recommend it, so they'll be linked below. And of course, I'll also leave all my sources in the description as well if you'd like to learn more. In the last video, I talked about how both Roma and Parasite opened a door for international films at the Oscars, specifically for Best Picture. But now that the door has been opened, we need to ask ourselves if it will remain so, how we can open it even wider, and how we can respond to those who want to shut it. What will happen with international films going forward? my head, there exists two categories of international-esque films. Films about people of color from other countries made by Western filmmakers like Slumdog Millionaire, The Last Emperor, and Lion, and international films made by international filmmakers like Roma and Parasite. Both have their merits, although it would be nicer if actual international filmmakers made those international stories. I can't knock films like Slumdog, The Last Emperor, and Lion, because at least they're being made. They're being found, produced, shown on levels greater to those than if they were fully international, and recognized for their excellence, and that's pretty damn cool. But take a look at the people who actually won awards for Slumdog.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, mostly white and Western. In fact, the only Indian people to be nominated and win for this film was A.R. Rahman for both Best Original Score and Song, and Russell Pukuri for Best Sound Mixing, which he shared with Ian Tapp and Richard Prick. No one else was nominated. The only other time actual Indian people were on that stage for this film was for Best Picture, and they were only there as support while white filmmakers received the awards. None of the Indian actors were nominated for their roles, even though they all received critical acclaim. Even the more famous Bollywood actors like Onil Kapoor and Irfan Khan, two actors who had been working in Bollywood for years and years and were well known because of it, weren't nominated. And I can't help but think that if these roles were played by Western actors of the same caliber, they would have been. Out of 11 nominees and winners, 2 were Indian. How about the people who won for The Last Emperor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, once again, mostly white. A large number of the crew was Italian, so they did have to work quite hard to get into Hollywood in the first place, but still, there was not a single Asian cast member nominated, even though it was a film about Asia with critically acclaimed performances from Asian actors. Once again, the only Asian people to be nominated and win were Ryuichi Sakamoto and Kong Soo for Best Original Score, which they shared with David Byrne. Out of 9 nominations, out of 15 nominees and winners, 2 were Asian. And what about Lion? Well, this one was actually a little bit better. The film didn't win any Oscars, but was nominated for a number of them. 6 categories, 9 people. And out of those 9, the one Indian nominee was actor Dev Patel. Finally, an actual actor of color from a movie about a country other than America getting a nomination. Hallelujah. He didn't win, but at least he was nominated. And yes, he was born and did grow up in Britain, but he's still Indian, so we're counting it. Is it possible that he had a higher chance of being nominated because he's British and grew up in Britain and has been working in British and American media his whole career? Yeah, maybe. Even still, out of 9 nominees, he was the only Indian person nominated and the only Indian cast member nominated. A similar thing happened in 2020 with Parasite. Thankfully, Korean people were largely those who made this film, so any nominations obviously went to Korean people. But at the same time, it was only the crew that was nominated, much like those other examples. Yang Jin-mo was nominated for Best Editing, and Lee Ha-jun and Cho Won-woo were nominated for Best Production Design, but it was only Bong Joon-ho that actually won anything. He received every single award, sharing Best Original Screenplay with Han Jin-won and Best Picture with Kwak Si-nae, but for the most part, it was all him. And it is a bit disheartening that the Academy is only rewarding Bong and completely ignoring the fantastic cast who gave it their absolute all for this film. I mean, this cast delivered some of my favorite performances of the year, and yet not a single cast member was nominated for their work. But there might actually be a reason for all of this. Voting for categories are restricted to members of the Academy who work in that field, aka actors will vote for actors, writers for writers, etc., etc. And in order for someone to be nominated, people have to know who they are. For actors to be nominated, other actors have to know their names and know what they've been a part of. And, once again, this is a lot easier for Western actors. So let's go through the cast of Parasite and take a look at their chances of being nominated. Let's start with Choi Woo-sik and Park So-dam. Choi Woo-sik would probably be vying for Best Actor in a Leading Role, and Park So-dam would probably be going for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Of course, these are very competitive categories, and being known in Hollywood amongst Academy voters would help. So maybe they weren't nominated because they're more up-and-comers. They've definitely been in some exciting projects and were making names for themselves, but before Parasite, they weren't as big as some of their other cast members. So there you go. They were up-and-comers, so their names weren't widely known yet, so their chances of getting nominated were not super high. Except, this isn't entirely true. Western up-and-comers have been nominated for their roles in the past. Take a look at Carey Mulligan for An Education, Gabourey Sidibe for Precious, Timothée Chalamet for Call Me By Your Name, Saoirse Ronan for Atonement, then later Brooklyn, and Lucas Hedges for Manchester by the Sea, just to name a few. They were all relatively nobodies before, and then they got nominated for Oscars, and now they have successful careers. I think the only one of them that struggled a bit after their nomination was Gabourey Sidibe, and when you line her up with the others, I think you can figure out why she may have been treated differently. But that's a topic for another video entirely. My point is that it's not unheard of for virtual nobodies or up-and-comers to be nominated for an Oscar. Academy voters watched their movies, learned who they were, learned their names, and remembered them when voting for nominees. There should be no reason for those same voters not to be able to do the exact same thing for Choi Woo-shik and Park So-dam. And, like, it's not hard to know their names. I, for one, know that after I watch a movie that I really loved, I look stuff up about it, and one of the first things I learn are the cast members. And now you might say, but Oishi, in your last video, you mentioned how cast and crew members doing interviews and press is a big way to get their names out there. Maybe Choi Woo-shik and Park So-dam remained relatively unknown because they weren't getting as much press. Yeah, okay, you may have a point, but the thing is, they were doing press. Choi Woo-shik did a scene breakdown with Bong Joon-ho for Vanity Fair, Q&As at film festivals like Cannes and TIFF, and red carpet and backstage interviews at the SAGs. Park So-dam wasn't any less busy. She too did red carpet and backstage interviews, an interview with W Magazine, and participated in the Academy Conversations, which was uploaded on the Oscars official YouTube channel. Not to mention that videos of her doing the Jessica jingle were absolutely blowing up. And look, I'm not saying that people in YouTube comments are always right, but a lot of people wanted this nomination and it didn't happen, which is heartbreaking. So these up-and-comers were out there, showing their faces and making themselves known. But okay, maybe Academy voters are too busy to sit down and watch interviews. That doesn't mean they can't know their names. It's not like their names are some obscure information. You want to see how long it takes to learn them? There you go! Now you know. Not a single interview watched and you can still know them. Now you can vote for them, now you can recognize them for their work. Basically, if you can know Timothée Chalamet's name, you can know Choi Woo-shik's. If you can know Saoirse Ronan's name, you can know Park So-dam's. If you can vote for these guys, you can vote for these guys. Well, what about some of the bigger actors? What about Choi Yo-jung, Lee Sung-gyun, and Jang Hye-jin? Well, they have even less of a reason to be exempt from nominations. They've been around for a while. They've been in a number of projects over the years and made substantial names for themselves. And they knocked it out of the park with this film. Again, it's not difficult to know these actors and want to recognize them. But the one that boggles my mind the most is Song Kang-ho. This man is one of the most famous actors in South Korea. He's been working for decades and is beloved across the nation, and for good reason. Seriously, if you haven't seen another Song Kang-ho film, please do. And if you want a place to start, how about his other Bong Joon-ho films? That's right, not only has Song Kang-ho been in numerous movies in general, but he's been in many of Bong's other films. This is not a new duo. They have been working together for over a decade, and Bong film or not, Song Kang-ho has always brought 110% to his films, and Parasite was no different. That scene in the gymnasium, one of my favorites from the whole movie. Practicing the Peachcon, the final monologue, fantastic. Song Kang-ho is international treasure. And they couldn't even give him a nomination? I'm not even asking for him to win, although that would be nice. If they still wanted to give it to Brad Pitt, fine, but at least nominate Song Kang-ho. At least recognize him. This is the one that gets me the most worked up. I know not every one of these actors can be nominated. It's quite rare for that to happen. But not even one? Not even Song Kang-ho? It's really sad that Parasite wasn't nominated for any acting awards, especially with this talented of a cast. The Academy only rewarding Bong Joon-ho is like saying Bong was the only one who worked on this film, the only one worthy of recognition. And I'm not saying that Bong doesn't deserve to be rewarded, because he absolutely does. I'm saying that Bong isn't the only one who worked to make this film as great as it is. And Bong knew that very clearly.
영화를 함께 만든 우리 멋진 그 배우와 모든 스태프들이 여기 와 있습니다. 네, 우리 사랑하는 송강호님, 이선균, 최우식, 장혜진, 박명훈, 박소담, 이정은 멋진 배우들.
All our loving crew members and cast members are here with us today. Please send a round of applause to the actors and crew members of Parasite.
And our great cinematographer 홍경표 and production designer 이하준 and editor 양진모 and wonderful 우리 모든 예술가들에게 찬사를 보냅니다.
I congratulate all the great artists here tonight.
Bong knew his cast and crew's efforts were just as important to the success of Parasite as he was, and he made sure that they were given their moment to shine, that they were given the recognition they deserved. I just wish the Academy gave them that recognition directly. So while Parasite as a whole won the biggest award of the night, and some of the crew was nominated, it's a shame that the fantastic cast wasn't recognized. I think Be Kind Rewind put it best.
Slumdog Millionaire won 8 Academy Awards. The Last Emperor won 9, and thankfully, God bless it, Parasite recently won 4. Yet 0 acting nominations, as if to say they're great in spite of their actors.
Thankfully, Roma had a better time with acting nominations, with both Yalitza Aparicio and Marina de Tavira receiving nominations, but it needs to happen more. This needs to change. Western and international films starring people of color have been nominated for, and have now won, Best Picture, but it's time we start recognizing the talented actors in those films, without whom the final product would not be what it is. By all means, the Academy can and should continue rewarding directors and other crew, but they need to start taking into consideration the people who appear on scene. Parasite's Best Picture win was met with tons of love and praise, as it should have been. But unfortunately, we live in a society where ignorance runs rampant, and there were some that came at this win with a much more negative view. One in particular was this guy, who made a video, and oh, what a video it was. As far as I know, the original video has since been taken down, so I'll be using footage from Amanda the Jedi and CRITIKAL, and even if the original video is still up, I cannot watch it without logical interjections from people I actually respect. So their channels will be linked down below if you want to go check them out. They're awesome. This dude was so pissed off that Parasite won Best Picture over other American films, and went on a whole annoying rant that was frankly exhausting to listen to. I've seen it like 4 times now, and I think I lost about 15,000 brain cells each time.
It already was nominated and won for Best Foreign Film. So if Best Foreign Film is the equivalent to Best Picture for the foreign films, why is it then allowed to be nominated for Best Picture?
Essentially, this is what his whole argument hinges around, that because Parasite was nominated for and won Best International Feature Film, it shouldn't have been nominated for Best Picture, and it definitely shouldn't have won. In regards to his actual argument, it's not much of one. Parasite was nominated in both categories because it was really that good. So good that the Academy wanted to recognize it in both. The same thing applies to Roma.
It was ridiculous last year when Roma was nominated.
Oh, of course he doesn't like Roma either. So this guy goes on to spit absolute drivel with little to no backing for any of his arguments. He mentions how international films shouldn't be qualified to win Best Picture, and how Best Animated Feature Film was created because Beauty and the Beast was nominated for Best Picture one year, so they created a whole separate category for animated films afterwards, and how he'd be okay with any other Best Picture nominee winning other than Parasite because at least they're American. And again, there are some major holes in his argument. In terms of how international films shouldn't be qualified for Best Picture, may I reintroduce you to the 2011 Best Picture winner, The Artist? That film was French, produced by France, made by French filmmakers, starring French actors. It was a silent film, so it wasn't nominated for what was at the time Best Foreign Language Film, because there was no language, but it was still an international film that took home Best Picture. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anyone ranting about that. Is that because there are no words, so you didn't have to actually listen to a different language? Is it because French culture is closer to American culture than Korean culture is? Is it because the cast and crew were largely white and not Korean? I don't know, you decide. Next, the comment about animated feature. He's playing the whole thing off as if after the Best Animated Feature category was created, no animated films were ever nominated for Best Picture, and that was a good thing. And once again, I'm going to have to call bull. Enter Up and enter Toy Story 3. Both were nominated for Best Animated Feature in 2010 and 2011 respectively, which they both won. On top of that, they were both nominated for Best Picture in 2010 and 2011 respectively. They didn't win, but they both received those nominations even after a category specifically curated for them was created. Clearly, it's not uncommon for a film to be nominated in more than one Best Of category, and once again, no one really had a problem with these nominations as far as I know. Finally, this dude said he would have been okay with any film winning Best Picture other than Parasite as long as they were American.
But it could have been Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Marriage Story, 1917, Ford v. Ford. I'm sorry, if you won Best Foreign Film, you should automatically be invalid to even be qualified to win Best Picture.
What? Hang on.
But it could have been Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Marriage Story, 1917, 1917, 1917.
Hey dude, 1917 is a British film. It was produced by the UK, made by British filmmakers, and starring a British cast. I mean, look at this. Look at this. This is the most British picture I have ever seen. I can hear the accent coming off of it. Oh, what's that? It's made in the English language. Oh, okay, and it's produced by majority white people? That's why Neckbeard is including it in his argument? Oh, okay. Look, I'm not trying to knock 1917. I love this film. It's incredible. The performances, the cinematography, the story, the effects, all amazing. It was the second movie I watched more than once in theaters. I saw it twice. It was the first movie I watched in IMAX, and it was the last film I saw in theaters before the entire world shut down. So yeah, it has a very special place in my heart. But it's not American. It's part of our squad, which is so close to American films that it makes people forget that it's not. Because better a British film wins Best Picture than a Korean one, huh? But we haven't even gotten to the most aggravating part yet.
Out of everybody in the United States or the America, how many people actually seen Parasite? Okay? I don't know what Parasite is. I don't give a about Parasite. It's fine. It won Best Foreign Film. You know why? Because it's a goddamn foreign film.
So yeah, a self-admission that he hasn't even seen Parasite, which in my eyes makes everything he has to say invalid. Even worse is that he goes on to say this.
What is more important to our culture than the Joker? About a movie that talks about mental illness not being taken seriously, about how people in high places look down and frown upon the poor, the poverty, and people with mental illness, and how we need to take this more serious. But no, forget all these social problems that Joker touched upon. Let's have a better woke agenda.
It would be funny if it wasn't so exhausting.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb, you just have to laugh through the pain. So if you haven't figured it out, Parasite is about all of those things. He just used Parasite's description to explain why Joker should have won over Parasite. Like, everything that Joker was talking about, Parasite did too. Except maybe for the mental illness part, I will give Joker that. But the larger theme of both those movies, the struggle of classifieds, Parasite did in a much, much more artful way.
Why can't the best movie win the Best Picture?
It did, man. It did. Sorry you can't see that, 'cause you didn't see it.
So this video is not an informed, educated response to the Oscars and the Academy's decisions. It's a vapid rant with almost no valid points, dripping in xenophobia from start to finish.
Again, how many people in this country seen Parasite?
A lot. Like a lot. As I said in my last video, on President's Day weekend, the first weekend after it won Best Picture, Parasite made $6.8 million, making that weekend its highest grossing since its debut in October. In the end, Parasite grossed $53.4 million in the US and Canada and $211.2 million in other countries, making for a worldwide total of $264.4 million. If you watched Parasite and you genuinely didn't enjoy it, if you had real constructive criticism on it and didn't think it deserved to win because of that, that is a completely different story. Opinions can differ. People can enjoy different things. That's what subjectivity is. Subjectivity is not hating on a film solely because it's told in a language other than English and the people who made it are not American. That's called racism. This wasn't just a one-off thing. Twitter brought even more of this. A man named Bong Joon-ho wins Oscar for Best Original Screenplay over Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in 1917. Acceptance speech was, "Great honor, thank you." Then he proceeds to give the rest of his speech in Korean. These people are the destruction of America. Like, yeah, he won because it was the best screenplay of the year, and he gave his acceptance speech in Korean, the language he's the most comfortable in order to best express his thoughts and feelings. And this person tried to backtrack, saying that by these people, he meant the Academy and not Korean people, but again, anyone with half a brain can see this is absolute bull. Nowhere in this tweet did he even mention the Academy, but he made sure to mention the Korean language. Just say you hate Asian people and go. Like, it's less characters, it's more to the point, and it's more accurate to your sentiments. If this tweet was an essay, I'd take 2 marks off for your waffling and beating around the bush. Like, this tweet would be like asking an American filmmaker to speak in Korean at a Korean award show. It's ridiculous. Why would anyone choose to speak in a language they're not the most comfortable in during one of the most crazy moments of their career, especially when that moment sparks a highly emotional response that you want to get absolutely right, especially when you've got a very talented and capable interpreter by your side. It's illogical. Like, let's take the Césars for example. If you don't know, the Césars are a huge film award show in France, kind of like the Academy Awards for France. And American films and filmmakers have been honored at the Césars in the past, mostly in the category titled Best Foreign Language Film. Coincidentally, Parasite won in this category in 2020. Imagine if an American filmmaker won a César and delivered their acceptance speech in English with a French interpreter. I guarantee you, absolutely no one in that room would be mad about it. No one would get on Twitter and yell at them to speak in French. It's just not a thing. It would not happen. But when a Korean man speaks in Korean at an American award show, tiny-minded people's brains cannot comprehend it apparently. So unfortunately, people like this actually exist in the world, and the bad news is, I don't think they'll ever go away. No matter how much we progress, no matter how many more international non-English language films win Best Picture in the future, there will always be ignorant people who find a problem with it for no reason other than racism. But while some people spew hatred towards films like Roma and Parasite, there are far more people who give these films all the love they deserve, and that's what matters here. You can't please everyone, and frankly, people like Neckbeard and Tweeter won't ever be pleased by international films, so there's no point in trying. What there is purpose in doing is making stunning art regardless, art that everyone involved loves, that says something important, and that affects people all over the world. Because at the end of the day, Bong Joon-ho and the cast and crew of Parasite have not been harmed by these people at all. Bong Joon-ho is still a multi-Academy Award winner, and Parasite has still made history as the first international non-English language Best Picture winner. And no matter what anyone says, that's pretty damn important. There's a lot that's wrong with the Academy. I think if I've done one thing with this 3-part series, it's making that fact quite clear. Sometimes the Academy rewards people for the wrong films, excludes films that deserve to be rewarded, and gives Best Picture to the wrong movie. That last thing may have been the case in 2019, but most definitely was not in 2020. It's incredible that Roma and Parasite were shown as much love as they were, but the historical moment made by Parasite's win could have come earlier, seeing as it took 92 years before an international non-English language film won Best Picture. Moving forward, the Academy needs to acknowledge more international films, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's necessary. In our current global filmmaking landscape, countries from all around the world are putting out bigger and better art than ever before, and we as a society are finally starting to take more notice. So when we find the next Roma or the next Parasite, people like me are not going to sit quietly and let it pass the Academy by. We're gonna be loud, we're gonna yell, and we're gonna make sure those films get the recognition they deserve. I don't know what the next international film to get to Best Picture will be, but I hope we don't have to wait another 92 years to see it. The art is right there for us. We just have to be willing to embrace it. In the wise words of Bong Joon-ho, once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to many more amazing films.
I'm ready to drink tonight. So. Until next morning. Thank you.